They dragged her out of her own front door in broad daylight, screaming, fighting, clawing at the dirt, and hung her from an oak tree in the middle of the street like she was nothing. Like she was a message. And every single neighbor on that block watched from behind their curtains, and not one of them picked up a phone. But here's what those men never counted on. Someone did get a call, a man they'd never met, a man with nothing left to lose, and a very particular idea of what justice looks like. If you've ever wondered what it takes for one person to change everything, stay right here. This is that story. Drop the name of your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story has traveled. And if you're new here, subscribe. You're going to want to be here for all 5 parts. The rope was still swaying when the police finally showed up. Not because someone called 911 in a panic, not because a neighbor had rushed outside and flagged down a cruiser. The rope was still swaying because it had only been 11 minutes since Darnell Briggs and his 2 associates had cut Margaret Hollis down, thrown her on the sidewalk like a bag of trash, and driven away in a black pickup truck with no plates. 11 minutes. And in those 11 minutes, not a single person on Millard Street had come outside. Officer Raymond Cho was the first one through the door of the ambulance bay that afternoon, notepad already in hand, already knowing in that particular way that experienced officers know things that this case was going to be complicated. The kind of complicated that makes careers shorter. Margaret Hollis was 64 years old. She weighed maybe 115 pounds. She had lived in the same house on Millard Street for 31 years. She had raised 3 children there, buried a husband there, and planted a garden in the backyard that her neighbors used to compliment her on every spring. She was lying in a hospital bed with 2 cracked ribs, a fractured wrist, severe rope burns around her neck, and a look in her eyes that Cho had seen before, the look of someone who has already decided that talking to the police is more dangerous than staying silent. "Mrs. Hollis," Cho said, pulling a chair close to her bed. "I need to ask you some questions. I know you're in pain. I know you're scared. But what happened to you today?" "I fell," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Cho set down his pen. "Ma'am?" "I said I fell." She turned her face toward the window. "I'm clumsy. Always have been. My daughter will tell you." Cho sat with that for a moment. He looked at the rope burns. He looked at the fractured wrist, the kind of fracture that happens when someone's hands are bound and they're struggling. He looked at the bruising on her forearms, the defensive marks, the split lip that told the whole story she was refusing to tell. "Okay," he said quietly. He stood up. "I'll be back tomorrow." She didn't answer. In the hallway, he pulled out his phone and made a call he didn't particularly want to make. 240 miles away, in a town called Cedar Falls, a man named Cole Brannigan was standing in his kitchen making grilled cheese sandwiches and listening to his daughter argue with him about her curfew. Cole was 47 years old. He was broad-shouldered, a little gray at the temples, with the kind of hands that told you he'd worked construction for most of his adult life. He had a 12-year-old daughter named Lily, who was at this precise moment making an extremely compelling case for why 11 p.m. was a perfectly reasonable curfew for a school dance. "Dad, everybody is staying until 11. Everybody's parents are not me," Cole said, flipping the sandwich. "That's such a cop-out answer." His phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it and felt his stomach drop. The name on the screen was Raymond Cho. He and Ray had grown up 3 blocks apart. They'd played Little League together, gotten into trouble together, drifted apart for 20 years, and reconnected when Cole had done some renovation work on Ray's house 3 years ago. They weren't the kind of friends who talked every week. They were the kind of friends who, when one of them called the other, picked up no matter what. "Hold on," Cole said to Lily. He answered the phone. "Ray? Cole?" A pause. "You got a minute?" Something in Ray's voice made Cole turn off the stove. "Yeah, I got a minute. I need to tell you about something that happened today. And I need you to know up front that I'm calling you as your friend, not as a cop. Because as a cop, I cannot officially ask you to do what I'm about to not officially ask you to do. Cole leaned against the counter. Go ahead. Ray told him about Margaret Hollis. He told him about Millard Street and the oak tree and the rope. He told him about the 11 minutes and the closed curtains. He told him about the look in her eyes and the things she wasn't saying. And then he said the part that made Cole's jaw tighten. This isn't the first time, Cole. Margaret's the 5th person in that neighborhood in 8 months. Before her there was a retired school principal. They broke his front window 3 nights in a row until he paid. Before that, a Vietnamese woman 70 years old runs a little alterations shop. They roughed her up in the parking lot. Before that, Ray. Cole's voice was flat. Why are you calling me? A longer pause. Because I know who's doing it, Ray said. I know his name. I know his operation. I know where his people go on Friday nights. And I can't touch him. I cannot officially touch him, Cole, because every time we get close, witnesses go silent, and the DA gets cold feet, and the whole thing evaporates. And this woman... Ray's voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat. She's the 5th one, Cole, and I don't want her to be the last one we can't help. Cole was quiet for a long time. Lily had stopped arguing about her curfew. She was watching him from across the kitchen with those sharp eyes of hers that didn't miss anything. Send me what you've got, Cole said finally. Cole. I'm not asking you to do anything, Ray. I'm not asking you to look the other way on anything. I'm just saying, send me what you've got, as a friend. Another pause, then, check your email in 10 minutes. The call ended. Cole set the phone down on the counter and stood there for a moment, staring at nothing. Dad, Lily said. Who was that? An old friend. He turned back to the stove and flipped the sandwich again, even though it didn't need it. Your curfew is 10:30. That's final. She groaned and disappeared into the living room. Cole picked up his phone and opened his email. He read for 2 hours that night after Lily went to bed. Ray hadn't sent him the official case file. He was too careful for that. What he'd sent was a long, dense email written in the careful language of someone who knows what they're not allowed to say. Full of phrases like, you might find it interesting, and I'm told that residents in that area have mentioned, and this is publicly available information. But the picture it painted was clear enough. The neighborhood was called Westfield Heights. It sat on the west side of a mid-sized city that had been slowly hollowing out for 30 years. One of those places where the factories closed and the jobs left, and the people who couldn't afford to leave stayed, and the people who profited from their staying moved in with outstretched hands. The man behind the operation was named Gerald Marsh, 53 years old. On paper, he was a property developer. He owned a management company, 3 LLCs, and a portfolio of about 60 residential properties in Westfield Heights alone. He also owned or had interests in a pawn shop, a check cashing outlet, and a bail bonds company. He was, in other words, a man who had built an entire ecosystem around people who had no other options. The extortion piece was the newest layer. According to Ray's careful non-information, the pattern worked like this. Marsh's people, a loosely organized crew led by a man named Darnell Briggs, would identify homeowners in Westfield Heights who were behind on property taxes or dealing with code violations or simply old and isolated. They would approach them with an offer pay, a monthly security fee, and nothing bad would happen to your house, your car, your person. The ones who said no got a visit. Margaret Hollis had said no 3 times. Cole sat at his kitchen table at 1 a.m. reading, and he felt something moving around in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't rage exactly. It was colder than rage, more focused. He thought about his daughter asleep down the hall. He thought about what it would mean for her to grow up in a world where a 64-year-old woman gets hung from a tree in broad daylight, and every person who sees it closes their curtains. He thought no. He opened a new document on his laptop and started making a list. He arrived in Westfield Heights on a Thursday morning 3 days after Ray's call. He'd told Lily he had a job site to check on, which was technically true, in the loosest possible interpretation of the word technically. He'd arranged for her to stay with his sister for a few days. He'd packed a bag, loaded his truck, and driven the 240 miles without stopping for anything, except gas and a black coffee at a rest stop outside the county line. He didn't have a plan, exactly. What he had was a list of names, an address, and the particular patience of a man who has spent 20 years managing construction projects, which is to say, a man who knows that the most complex problems get solved by breaking them down into smaller problems, one at a time, until there's nothing left to solve. Millard Street looked exactly how he'd imagined it. A long residential block of 2-story houses, most of them older, many of them well-maintained in the way that people maintain things they're proud of, but can't afford to upgrade. Little porches, small lawns, a few flower boxes in windows. The oak tree at the end of the block was enormous. It had probably been there for 80 years. Its branches spread out over half the street like a canopy. Cole sat in his truck and looked at it for a long time. Then he got out. He wasn't sure what he expected to find at Margaret Hollis's front door. He'd gotten her address from Ray's email, presented, of course, as a neighbor who witnessed the incident and might have context to share. He knocked. Nothing. He knocked again. Mrs. Hollis, my name is Cole Brannigan. I drove down from Cedar Falls. Ray Cho asked me to check in on you. A long silence. Then, Ray Cho sent you. The voice from behind the door was thin and careful. Yes, ma'am. He said you might not want to talk to police. I'm not police. I'm a contractor. Another silence. He heard a chain being worked. A deadbolt. Then the door opened 2 inches held by a secondary chain, and one dark eye looked out at him. He held up his hands. Empty. You don't look like a contractor, she said. I get that a lot. She studied him for a moment longer. Then the chain came off and the door opened. Her living room was neat and clean and full of photographs. There were grandchildren on every surface, it seemed, and a needlepoint on the wall that said, Faith over Fear, in careful blue stitching. Margaret Hollis moved slowly. Her wrist was in a splint, and every time she shifted her weight, he could see the pain cross her face quick and controlled the way people in chronic pain learn to absorb it without showing it. She lowered herself into an armchair across from him and folded her hands in her lap. You drove 240 miles, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, ma'am. Why? Cole leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. Because Ray told me what happened to you and I couldn't sleep. She looked at him for a long time. People not being able to sleep doesn't usually change my situation, Mr. Brannigan. No, he said, it doesn't. What changes your situation is information. I need to understand what you're dealing with, and I need to understand it from you, not from a police report, not from someone else's version, from you. She was quiet. She looked at her hands. At the needlepoint on the wall. They'll come back, she said finally. If I talk to anyone, they'll come back. Darnell Briggs doesn't make empty threats. He told me he stood right there in my doorway, and he told me that if I spoke to police, if I spoke to anyone, they would come back and they would finish what they started, and then they'd go after my daughter. Her voice was perfectly steady. That was the most frightening part. I believe him, she said. I want you to understand that. I believe every word he said, because I've seen what he does to people who don't believe him. Cole nodded slowly. Who else has he done this to? She looked at him. On this street? Me Walter Pennington, 3 doors down the Nguyen's at the corner. On the next street over, I know of at least 2 more. And that's just the people I know about. And the police. The police came after Walter's window got broken. They took a report. That was 8 months ago. Nothing happened. She paused. You have to understand something about this neighborhood, Mr. Brannigan. The police are not the enemy, but they are not able to help us. They are not allowed to help us in any way that would actually matter. And the people who are behind this Gerald Marsh and his people, they know that. They have built their entire business around knowing that. Cole said, You know about Marsh? Something flickered in her eyes. Of course I know about Marsh. Everyone on this block knows about Marsh. He's been buying up properties in this neighborhood for 6 years. Every house he buys, the rent goes up and the maintenance goes down, and the people who can't pay get pushed out. The extortion is just... She paused, searching for the word. It's an accelerant. It makes people leave faster. Cole sat with that. He's displacing people. He's cleansing this neighborhood, she said, and the word came out with a quiet fury that was more powerful than anything she'd said yet. He wants us out. The old ones, the poor ones, the ones who've been here too long, and remember what this place used to be. He wants the land, and he wants the buildings, and he does not want us in them. And Darnell Briggs is how he gets that done. Cole was quiet for a moment. Mrs. Hollis, he said, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. She held his gaze. I'm always honest. Are you going to pay? Her chin lifted. No, she said. I am not going to pay. I'm going to die in this house before I give $1 to those men. This is my house. My husband built the back porch with his own hands. My children learned to walk on this floor. I have buried my mother, my husband, and my oldest son from this address. Her voice was still perfectly level. I will not leave, and I will not pay. Cole looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay, he said. Then let's talk about what we're going to do. He spent the next 3 days listening. He went door to door on Millard Street and the surrounding blocks, introducing himself as a friend of Ray Cho's, presenting himself as nothing more than a man who wanted to understand the situation. He wasn't there to make promises. He wasn't there to play hero. He was there to listen. Most people wouldn't open their doors. He understood that and didn't push, but some did. Walter Pennington was 71, a retired electrician who had lived on Millard Street for 40 years. He had a busted front window that was now covered with plywood and a badly sprained shoulder from the night 2 of Briggs's men had knocked him down his front steps when he'd tried to confront them. You want to know the worst part, Walter said. They were sitting on his back porch because Walter didn't like to be visible from the street anymore. The worst part isn't even the physical stuff. The worst part is that I don't trust my neighbors anymore. I don't know who's paid and who hasn't. I don't know who might have agreed to let them know if I talk to someone. That's what they've done to this block. They've made us suspicious of each other. Cole wrote that down. Linh Nguyen was 58, Vietnamese-American, ran a small alterations and dry cleaning shop out of the ground floor of her corner house. She'd been in Westfield Heights for 22 years. She showed him the burn marks on her side door from where someone had held a lighter to it as a warning. I have 3 employees, she said in careful English. They are my neighbors. If I close, they lose their job. I cannot close. I cannot leave. So I pay. She said it without shame, without apology. Just the flat mathematics of survival. But I don't want to pay anymore. On the 3rd day, he went back to Margaret's house. No. She made him coffee, the real kind, not from a machine, and they sat at her kitchen table, and he laid out everything he had. Not what he was going to do, just what he knew. Briggs operates with 3 other men regularly, Cole said. I've identified 2 of them from your description and from what Walter and Lynn told me. One of them works at a garage on 5th Street. That's where they park the truck. The Friday night thing Ray mentioned checks out. They drink at a bar called Hannigan's on Clement Avenue every Friday, and they don't get there until after 11. "How do you know this?" Margaret asked. "I drove by the garage 4 times this week," Cole said, "at different times of day. I sat in the parking lot of a laundromat across the street from Hannigan's last Friday night and counted." She looked at him. "You sat in a parking lot alone at midnight, counting people going into a bar?" "Yes, ma'am." She picked up her coffee cup. "Mr. Brannigan," she said carefully, "what exactly are you planning to do with all of this information?" Cole looked down at his notes, then back up at her. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "But I know that right now these men are operating on the assumption that no one is paying close enough attention to stop them. And the first step to stopping something is paying attention." She studied him for a long moment. "You have a daughter," she said. It wasn't a question. He blinked. "Yes. How did you—" "You drive a pickup with a booster seat in the back," she said, "and a pair of purple sneakers on the floor. What's her name?" "Lily." Something shifted in Margaret's expression. Not softness exactly, something more complex than that. "How old?" 12. She nodded slowly. She looked out the kitchen window at the backyard, where a garden had gone half wild, but still showed traces of deliberate, loving arrangement. "My youngest was 12 when her father died," she said. "I raised her alone, in this house." She paused. "You drove 240 miles for a woman you don't know, and you're sitting in parking lots at midnight because you think it matters." She turned back to look at him. "I'm going to ask you one more time, Mr. Brannigan, not what you're planning to do. What do you actually want to happen at the end of all this?" Cole was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful and direct. "I want Darnell Briggs to never set foot on this block again," he said. "I want Gerald Marsh to be exposed. I want every person in this neighborhood who's been paying those men to stop paying them, because they'll know it's safe to stop. And I want the people who closed their curtains to understand what they allowed to happen and to have the chance to make a different choice." Margaret was quiet. "That's a lot," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "And you think you can do that? One man, a contractor from Cedar Falls?" "I think," Cole said, "that someone has to start, and I'm here." She looked at him for a long, long moment. Then she stood up, moved to the kitchen counter, and opened a drawer. She took out a small spiral notebook, its cover worn and soft from handling, and set it on the table in front of him. "I've been writing things down," she said quietly. "For 3 months. Names, dates, what I saw, what I heard. Descriptions of vehicles, times of day." She tapped the notebook with one finger. "I knew that someday, if I waited long enough, there would be someone I could give this to." Cole looked at the notebook, then at her. "Mrs. Hollis," he said, "you might have just changed everything." She sat back down across from him, reached for her coffee. "Well," she said with the ghost of something that might have been a smile, "don't thank me yet, Mr. Brannigan. We haven't gotten to the hard part." That night, Cole sat alone in the small motel room he'd rented 8 blocks from Millard Street. Margaret's notebook open on the bed in front of him, and he went through it page by page. She had been meticulous. Dates going back almost 4 months. Vehicle descriptions, 2 trucks and an older sedan. A partial plate number she'd caught by watching from her upstairs window. Times she'd noted that Briggs almost always came between 4 and 7 p.m. Never in the morning, never after dark, which told Cole something about how the man liked to operate. He liked to do his work in daylight. He liked people to see. The notebook was also full of names Cole recognized from his door-to-door listening and names he didn't. There were 12 addresses listed. 12 separate households that had either been approached, threatened, or attacked in the last 4 months. 12. And behind all of them, woven through the pages like a thread, was a name that appeared again and again. Not in connection to the direct violence, never that close to it, but in connection to the properties. The lease agreements that had come up for renegotiation immediately after someone was extorted into selling. The LLC that had acquired Margaret's next-door neighbor's house 6 weeks after that neighbor suddenly decided to move. Gerald Marsh. Cole sat there in the thin light of a motel lamp, reading a 64-year-old woman's careful handwriting, and he felt that thing in his chest again, cold, focused. He picked up his phone. It was past midnight. He called Ray anyway. Ray answered on the second ring. "You're awake," Cole said. "I don't sleep much since this started," Ray said. "You read the notebook?" "I did." Cole paused. "Ray, she's been building a case for 4 months, on her own, from her window. She has partial plates, she has timelines, she has a paper trail to Marsh's property acquisitions that connects directly to the timing of the attacks." A long silence. "I know," Ray said quietly. "I know what she has. But Cole, you understand what I'm saying to you when I say I can't officially." "I know what you're saying, Ray. What I need is for this to land somewhere it can't be buried. I need it to be public enough that no one can make it disappear. I need the whole picture, not just Briggs, Marsh, the whole machine." "That's what I'm going to build," Cole said. Silence on the other end. "Cole." Ray's voice was low. "These are not good people. Briggs has a record. The men around him have records. Marsh has lawyers who've made 4 separate investigations evaporate in the last 6 years. I'm calling you as your friend right now, not as a cop. I'm asking you to be careful." "I will be." "And Cole?" A pause. "Don't do anything stupid. Whatever you find, whatever you build, bring it to me. Promise me that." Cole looked at the notebook on the bed, at 12 addresses, at the partial plate number written in a careful, deliberate hand by a woman who refused to close her curtains even when everyone else did. "I promise," he said. He ended the call, sat in the quiet of the motel room. Outside, the street was dark and still. He reached over and turned to a fresh page in Margaret's notebook. At the top of the page, he wrote one word, Marsh, and underneath it, he started to work. Cole didn't sleep that night. Not really. He lay on top of the motel bedspread with Margaret's notebook on his chest and stared at the ceiling and thought about patterns. That was how his brain worked, always had. On a job site, when something wasn't adding up, he didn't panic and he didn't rush. He sat with it. He let the pieces arrange themselves in his mind until the shape of the problem became clear. And once the shape was clear, the solution usually followed. The shape of this problem was becoming clear. Gerald Marsh wasn't a thug. Thugs were Darnell Briggs. Thugs were the men in that black pickup truck with no plates. Thugs were blunt instruments, useful but replaceable. Marsh was something more dangerous than a thug. Marsh was a system. He had built something that generated money and protected itself, and disposed of obstacles through layers of distance and deniability, and the reason 4 separate investigations had evaporated was because nobody had ever gotten close enough to the center of it. They'd always gone after the edges, the broken windows, the assaults, the men who did the physical work, and every time those men went quiet or went somewhere else, and the center remained untouched. Cole had spent 20 years managing construction projects. He knew something about load-bearing structures. You didn't bring down a building by attacking the walls. You found the foundation. At 5:30 in the morning, he got up, showered, made bad coffee from the motel machine, and called his sister. She picked up on the third ring, groggy and slightly annoyed. "Cole, it's 5:30. "I know. How's Lily?" A pause. He heard her sit up, heard the shift in her voice that meant she was paying attention now. His sister knew him too well. "She's fine. She's asleep. Cole, what's going on?" "I need a few more days." "You said 3 days." "I know what I said." A longer pause. "How many more days?" He looked at the notebook. at the fresh page with Marsh's name at the top and the web of connections spreading down from it. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "A week maybe. Possibly more." He heard her exhale. "Cole." Her voice dropped. "You're not doing something stupid, are you? Because I have raised Lily for 2 weeks every summer for 4 years, and I love that child, but she is not mine to raise permanently, and if you come home in pieces—" "I'm not doing anything stupid. I'm talking to people. People who might not want to be talked to. Not yet." That "not yet" is doing a lot of work in that sentence. "I'll call Lily tonight," he said. "Tell her I love her. I'll be in touch." He ended the call before his sister could ask anything else. He picked up his coffee and Margaret's notebook and sat down at the small table by the window and started making a different kind of list. Not names this time. Not addresses. Gaps. Things he didn't know yet. Things he needed to know before any of this could go anywhere that mattered. He needed to understand how the money moved. Briggs collected cash, that much was clear from what Margaret had told him. But cash had to go somewhere. It had to be cleaned. In an operation this size, with 12 addresses, and almost certainly more he didn't know about, the amounts were significant enough that they couldn't just disappear into Marsh's personal accounts. They'd be routed through something. The pawn shop was one possibility. The check cashing outlet was another. Either one would be a natural place to launder relatively small amounts of cash without attracting attention. And he also needed to understand the connection between the extortion timeline and the property acquisition timeline more precisely. Margaret's notebook showed it in fragments, but to make it stick, to make it the kind of evidence that a DA couldn't bury or a lawyer couldn't paper over, he needed the full picture. He needed to know exactly how many properties Marsh had acquired in Westfield Heights in the last 2 years, exactly what he'd paid for them, and exactly when those acquisitions had happened, relative to the incidents on Margaret's list. One that was public record, that was findable. He finished his coffee and went to work. The county assessor's office opened at 8:30. Cole was in the parking lot at 8:15. The woman behind the counter was somewhere in her late 50s, efficient and unhurried, with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and the expression of someone who had answered the same 4 questions approximately 10,000 times. "I'm looking for property transaction records for a specific area," Cole told her. "Westfield Heights, last 3 years. Is that something I can access?" "Public record," she said. "You can search online or I can pull the physical records if you need them." "Online is fine. Can I use one of the terminals?" She pointed him toward a row of computers along the far wall. He spent the next 2 hours there. The search was slow work. The county database was not built for the kind of cross-referencing he needed, but he was patient. By the time he stood up and stretched his back, he had photographed 47 pages of records on his phone. 47 properties. That was how many Marsh's various LLCs had acquired in Westfield Heights in the last 36 months. 47. At prices significantly below the assessed value in almost every case. In at least 19 of those cases, the acquisition had come within 60 days of an incident that Margaret had documented in her notebook. 60 days. That was fast. That was the kind of fast that only happened when someone had already decided to leave before they officially decided to leave. When someone had been frightened into a decision. Cole sat in his truck in the parking lot and looked at the photographs on his phone for a long time. Then he called Ray. 47 properties, he said when Ray picked up. 36 months. 19 of them connect directly to incidents in Margaret's notebook. A silence on Ray's end that told Cole the number had hit him. "Cole, I need something from you. Not official, just a name." "What kind of name?" "Someone who covers Westfield Heights. Local press community paper doesn't matter. Someone who's been paying attention to what's happening there." A pause. "Why?" "Because what I'm building needs to land somewhere public, Ray. You said it yourself. It needs to be visible enough that it can't be buried. The way that happens is if someone with a platform has it before it can be suppressed." Ray was quiet for a moment. "There's a woman," he said carefully. "Name's Dana Okafor. She writes for the Westfield Heights community paper. It's a small thing, mostly digital, maybe 4,000 regular readers. But she's been covering the displacement story for over a year. She's smart, and she's serious, and she's been trying to nail Marsh for months without enough to go on." "Can I approach her?" "She's not going to trust you." "I know. Can I approach her?" A sigh. "Her email is on the paper's website. Cole, be careful what you share until you know her." "I'm always careful." "You drove 240 miles on a phone call," Ray said. "That's not careful. That's something else." Cole almost smiled. "I'll be in touch." He ended the call and looked up the Westfield Heights Community Courier on his phone. Dana Okafor's byline was on 11 different articles in the last 14 months. Every single one of them touched on displacement property acquisition, or what she called in one piece the systematic economic siege of a neighborhood that has been allowed to happen in plain sight. Cole read 3 of her articles in full sitting in the parking lot. She was a good writer, sharp. She knew how to connect dots without overreaching. She also knew he could tell exactly where her story was incomplete. The pieces she didn't have evidence to print yet were visible in the places where her language carefully hedged and circled without landing. He sent her an email. It was short. "My name is Cole Brannigan. I have 47 property records, 4 months of documented incidents, partial vehicle IDs, and a timeline that connects Gerald Marsh's acquisitions directly to extortion activity in your coverage area. I am not a journalist. I'm just a person who's been paying attention. If you'd like to meet, I'm in Westfield Heights this week." He pressed send, put his phone in his pocket, and drove back toward Millard Street. Margaret was on her front porch when he pulled up. She was sitting in a wooden chair, her splinted wrist resting on the armrest, and she was watching the street with the particular stillness of someone who has gotten very good at watching, without appearing to watch. She looked at him as he came up the walk. "You were up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep." She nodded toward the other chair. "Sit down. I made biscuits." He sat. She disappeared inside and came back with a plate and 2 mugs of coffee, moving carefully with her wrist. And he almost got up to help her, and then didn't, because he understood by now that she would not want him to. She set the plate between them and sat back down and looked at the street. "Walter Pennington came over this morning," she said. "Early, before 7. Cole looked at her. "What did he want?" "He wanted to tell me that someone knocked on his door last night. Not Briggs, someone he didn't recognize. A younger man," he said. "Just stood at the door and looked at Walter and said, 'We hear you've been talking to people.'" She paused. "That's all he said. Then he left." Cole set down his coffee mug. His voice was level. "How does Walter seem?" "Scared," Margaret said. "Scared in a way that's different from before. Before he was scared of the physical, the window, the shoulder. Now he's scared of something he can't see." She turned to look at Cole directly. "They know you're here. Maybe not who you are, but they know someone is asking questions." Cole was quiet for a moment, working through the implications. "Does Walter know where I'm staying?" "No, I haven't told anyone where you're staying." A pause. "I'm not Walter Pennington. Mr. Brannigan, I don't fall apart when someone looks at me through a door." "I know that," Cole said. "But this changes things," she said. Her voice was careful and precise, the way it was when she was being most serious. "If they're already watching for movement on this block, you can't keep coming here. Not in that truck. Not the same route." She picked up her coffee. "You're not the only one who knows how to pay attention." He looked at her. The morning sun was on her face, and he could see the rope burn on her neck above the collar of her blouse. Reddish raw at the edges, still healing, and something moved through him that was part fury and part a kind of complicated respect. "What are you thinking?" he said. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that there's someone else you should talk to. Someone I didn't mention before because I wasn't sure I trusted you yet." She set her mug down. "I trust you now. His name is Robert Stills. He lives on the next block, Carver Street. He's 78 years old, and he has congestive heart failure, and he doesn't leave his house much anymore." She paused. "He also spent 31 years as a forensic accountant for the federal government." Cole stared at her. "He worked in financial crimes," Margaret said with a composure that suggested she had been saving this particular piece of information deliberately, like a card held carefully in hand until the right moment. "He retired here 10 years ago because his daughter lives nearby. Marsh's people approached him 6 months ago. He told them, and I am quoting him directly, that if they set foot on his property again, he would file a RICO complaint so thoroughly documented that their grandchildren would still be answering questions about it." "Did they come back?" Cole said. "No," Margaret said. "They're not entirely stupid, but they put him on a list. He's been watching this whole thing from his front window for 6 months, and he has been documenting it the same way I have, but with a level of financial and legal precision that—" She paused, "that I do not have." Cole sat very still. "Margaret," he said quietly, "why are you telling me this now?" She looked at him directly. "Because last night, after Walter came to me, I called Robert, and I told him about you, and he said—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He said, 'Send him over. It's time we stopped being patient.'" Robert Stills opened his door before Cole could knock. He was a tall man, significantly thinner than his frame suggested he was built for, with close-cropped white hair and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He moved slowly but not weakly, the deliberate movement of a man managing his body with the same precision he had once applied to numbers. "Cole Brannigan," he said. Not a greeting, an assessment. "Mr. Stills." "Come in." He stepped back. "I just made tea. I don't drink coffee anymore, doctor's orders. You'll have tea, or you'll have nothing." "Tea is fine," Cole said. The living room was filled with books, and on the dining table carefully organized stacks of paper. Cole recognized the arrangement. It was how he organized his own project files by date and by subject, with color-coded tabs and cross-reference notes in the margins. Robert lowered himself into a chair at the table and nodded Cole toward the one across from him. Between them on the table was a folder, roughly 2 inches thick. "Margaret tells me you have 47 acquisition records," Robert said. "Yes, sir. I have 63. He tapped the folder. "Including 11 that were completed through a third-party LLC that is not publicly registered to Marsh, but which I have traced through 2 subsidiary relationships to his primary holding company." He paused. "I have also documented the cash flow patterns at the pawn shop and the check cashing outlet. Not completely, I don't have access to internal records, but I have enough of the external pattern to establish a strong inferential case for money laundering." Cole felt the back of his neck prickle. How cash businesses that accept high volumes of small transactions are nearly impossible to audit from the outside, Robert said. But the pattern of cash deposits that those businesses make to Marsh's primary account, which is registered as a property management operating account, can be inferred from his tax filings, which are partially public through his LLC registrations, and from the purchasing patterns of the properties themselves. He folded his hands on the table. "I have spent 6 months building this, and I have been waiting for the right opportunity to do something with it, because if it goes to the wrong person, it disappears. I've seen it disappear before." "Ray Cho," Cole said. Robert shook his head. "Ray Cho is a good man and a good officer, but he is one officer in a department that has, shall we say, complicated relationships with the property development interests in this city. I don't say that as an accusation. I say it as a structural reality." "Dana Okafor," Cole said. Robert looked at him sharply. "You know about Dana." "I reached out to her this morning." "Dear." A pause. Robert studied him. "She's been trying to get this story for a year. She's been stymied every time by the same problem. She has the narrative, but she doesn't have the hard financial documentation to print it without being sued into oblivion. He tapped the folder again. I have the documentation. But I'm a 78-year-old man with congestive heart failure, and I don't have the physical capacity to do what needs to be done next. He looked at Cole steadily. Which is why, when Margaret described you to me, I thought, here is the missing piece. Cole looked at the folder, at the man across from him, at the table full of organized, careful, meticulous work built over 6 months of watching from a window. What's the missing piece? He said. Robert leaned forward slightly. Darnell Briggs, he said. I have the money. Margaret has the incidents. Dana has the narrative. What nobody has is Briggs himself on record connected to Marsh. Not through inference, not through the paper trail. A direct, documented, undeniable connection. Because Briggs is how Marsh has always protected himself. Briggs is insulated. He operates in cash. He doesn't communicate in writing. And every person who's seen him work is too frightened to say so on record. Cole was quiet for a moment. Someone needs to get close to Briggs, he said. Robert nodded slowly. Someone that Briggs doesn't know. Someone with no connection to this neighborhood, no existing relationship to any of the witnesses. Someone who Briggs would have no reason to fear. A pause. Someone who's been sitting in parking lots at midnight and going door to door on blocks where the doors don't open because they drove 240 miles and couldn't go home without doing something that mattered. Cole looked at him for a long time. Then he picked up the folder, opened it, and began to read. His phone buzzed 2 hours later as he was sitting in his truck outside Robert's house processing what he'd just spent the afternoon absorbing. An email notification. He opened it. Dana Okafor had replied. The email was 3 sentences long. I've been working this story for 14 months. I've been waiting for someone to show up with what you're describing. Name a time and place. Cole looked at the email. Looked at the folder on the passenger seat. Looked at Carver Street in the late afternoon light, ordinary and quiet, and hiding everything it hid. He wrote back tomorrow morning. Wherever you're comfortable. You pick the place. Her response came in under a minute. She named a diner on the east side of the city. 8 a.m. Come alone and bring the records. He put his phone down and drove back to the motel. That night, he called Lily. She answered on the first ring. Dad, when are you coming home? Her voice hit him somewhere directly behind the sternum the way it always did. Soon, he said. I promise. How's school? Fine. Aunt Karen makes me do homework right after school, which is barbaric. It's completely barbaric, he agreed. How's everything else? A pause. In that pause, he heard her doing what she always did, which was deciding how much of what she actually felt to share. She was 12, and already fluent in the particular language of people who have learned to be careful with their feelings. He hated that she'd had to learn it young, but he couldn't undo it. I'm okay, she said finally. Are you okay? I'm good, Lily. I'm doing something important, and I'm being careful about it. Is it dangerous? He thought about Darnell Briggs standing in a woman's doorway in broad daylight, telling her what would happen if she spoke. He thought about a message delivered to Walter Pennington's door. We hear you've been talking to people. Not yet, he said. That's the same thing you said to Aunt Karen, Lily said. That not yet is a terrible answer. He almost laughed. Good night, Lily. Good night, Dad. Come home soon. He sat in the quiet of the motel room for a moment after the call ended. Margaret's notebook on the bed, Robert's folder on the table, Darnell Briggs, somewhere in this city, running his operation, utterly unaware that the ground was slowly being prepared beneath him. Cole picked up a pen, opened the folder to the page Robert had marked, and started learning everything he could about who Darnell Briggs actually was. Because the next phase of this was not about documents or records or property transactions. The next phase was about a man and the men around him, and the thing they assumed no one would ever do. Show up. Dana Okafor was already in the booth when Cole walked in, and she had the look of someone who had been there long enough to finish one cup of coffee and order a second. She was in her mid-30s, compact and watchful, with a reporter's notebook open on the table beside her phone, and the particular expression of a person who has learned through experience not to let hope get ahead of evidence. She looked him over when he slid into the booth across from her. He set Robert's folder on the table between them and watched her look at it. "How much is in there?" she said. 63 property transactions, cash flow inference across 2 business fronts, 12 documented incidents connecting to acquisition timelines, partial vehicle IDs on Briggs's crew. He paused. And 4 months of handwritten observation logs from a 64-year-old woman who they hung from a tree and who still refuses to leave her house. Dana looked at him for a moment. Then she picked up the folder and opened it. She didn't speak for a long time. Cole drank his coffee and let her work through it. That was another thing. Construction had taught him. There were moments where the most useful thing you could do was be quiet and let someone else think. Finally, she closed the folder and set it down. "Robert Stills put this together," she said. It wasn't a question. "Mostly him. Some of it is mine." "I've been trying to get Robert to talk to me for 8 months, she said. "Every time I approached him, he told me he wasn't ready." She looked at Cole. "What changed?" "Someone knocked on Walter Pennington's door and told him people were asking questions. Margaret thinks Briggs's people are starting to feel movement." He watched her face. "If that's true, the window for this is shorter than it was a week ago." Dana nodded slowly. She was already thinking he could see it the way her eyes moved, without focusing on anything in the room. "The financial documentation is the piece I've been missing. Without it, everything I have is narrative. It's compelling, but Marsh's lawyers have killed compelling before." She tapped the folder. "With this, I have something that can actually hold weight." She looked up. "But you said yourself you're still missing the direct connection between Briggs and Marsh. Without that, Marsh just cuts Briggs loose and walks away clean." "I know," Cole said. "So how do you get it?" He wrapped both hands around his coffee mug. "Briggs is at Hannigan's bar every Friday night. Has been for months. Margaret documented it. I've confirmed it myself. He goes late after 11, and he's usually there with at least 2 of the men who work directly under him." He paused. "What I need is a conversation. Not with Briggs, not yet. With one of the men around him. Someone lower. Someone who might feel the pressure differently than Briggs does." Dana looked at him carefully. "You're going to walk into a bar where these men drink and try to flip one of them." "Not flip. Listen. There's a difference." He set down the mug. "I'm not law enforcement. I can't offer anyone a deal. But I can sit in the right place at the right time and hear things that people say when they think no one important is listening. And sometimes that's enough. And if Briggs recognizes you, he has no idea who I am. He knows someone has been asking questions on Millard Street. He knows someone has, not me specifically, and not what I look like." Cole kept his voice flat and practical. "I've been careful about that." Dana was quiet for a moment. He could see her weighing at the journalist's instinct for when a source was being reckless versus when they were being strategic. "I want to be clear about something," she said. "I'm not printing anything that puts you or those residents at greater risk. Whatever you bring me, I don't publish until we both agree the timing is right. And when we do publish, it has to be complete enough that it can't be suppressed. That means Marsh, not just Briggs." "That's exactly what I want," Cole said. She looked at him for another moment. Then she reached into her bag and set a recorder on the table between them. "Then start from the beginning," she said. "Tell me everything." He talked for an hour and 40 minutes. She barely interrupted. When he finished, she sat back and looked at the recorder, and then at him, and something in her expression had shifted, not softer exactly, but more open, like a door that had been cracked. "Why are you doing this?" she said. "And don't say because it's the right thing. Everybody says that. I want the real reason." Cole thought about it honestly. "Because I have a 12-year-old daughter," he said, "and she's going to grow up in a world where what happened to Margaret Hollis either matters or it doesn't. And I get to have some say in which one." Dana looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up the folder and her notebook and her recorder, and she said, "Friday night. Don't go to Hannigan's alone." He went back to Margaret's house that afternoon using a different route on foot coming from the alley behind Carver Street, the way she'd suggested. She was in her kitchen when he came to the back door, and she let him in without a word and put a plate in front of him before he'd even sat down. "You look like you haven't eaten a real meal in 3 days," she said. "Probably more like 2, he admitted. She sat across from him while he ate. The kitchen was quiet and warm, and for a moment, the whole weight of what he'd been building for the last week settled over him in a way that felt almost peaceful. The calm before the part of the project where everything either comes together or falls apart. "Dana Okafor has the folder," he said. "She's in." Margaret nodded. "I know Dana. She wrote a piece about what happened to the Nguyen's last year. She came here and talked to me, and I told her what I could, which wasn't much at the time." A pause. "She's honest. That matters." "She wants Marsh, not just Briggs." "So do I." Margaret folded her hands on the table. "Have you thought about how far you're willing to take this?" He looked up from his plate. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she chose her words carefully, "that there's a version of this where everything you've built goes to the right people, and it's enough. The documentation, the financial connections, the property timeline. It gets published, it creates pressure, authorities are forced to act. That's one version." She paused. "And then there's a version where it's not enough, where Marsh's lawyers respond, and the story gets complicated, and Briggs goes quiet for a few months, and then this all starts again after the attention moves on." She looked at him steadily. "What do you do then?" Cole set down his fork. He thought about it the way he thought about problems on a job site, not what he wanted the answer to be, but what the answer actually was. "Then I find a way to get Briggs on record," he said, "something he can't walk away from." Margaret nodded slowly, as though this was the answer she'd expected. "I want to tell you something," she said, "about the night they took me." Cole went very still. She hadn't talked about the details before. She'd described the aftermath, the hospital, the fear, the decision not to speak to police, but not the event itself. And he hadn't pushed, because he understood that some things belong to the person they happen to, and they get shared on their terms, or not at all. "They came at 4:15 in the afternoon," she said. Her voice was completely controlled the way it got when she was saying something that cost her. "There were 4 of them. Darnell Briggs and 3 others. They knocked on my front door, and I answered because I was expecting my daughter to call, and I didn't think I just opened the door." She stopped, breathed. "Briggs said, 'Mrs. Hollis, this is your last conversation before things change.' Those were his exact words. I've written them down so I don't let my mind change them. 'This is your last conversation before things change.' And I told him." A ghost of something crossed her face. "I told him to get off my porch." Cole didn't say anything. "They dragged me out by both arms. I dropped my phone in the doorway. I could see it on the floor the whole time, just inside the door, and I kept thinking if I could just get back to it." She paused again. "There was a young man in the group. Couldn't have been more than 22, 23. And when they put that rope around my neck, this young man, he stepped back. He didn't help them, but he didn't stop them either." She looked at Cole. "I've thought about that young man every single day since then, because he was scared, and being scared is not the same as being willing, and I think," she stopped, "I think he is the person on that crew who might have something left to reach." Cole looked at her. "Do you know his name? I know his face. I know he drives the truck sometimes because I've seen him from my window. And I know that after they cut me down, he was the one who put my phone back inside my door." She paused. "He didn't have to do that. He did it anyway." Cole leaned forward. "Margaret, that's who I need to find." But he found him on a Wednesday afternoon at the garage on 5th Street. It took patience. Cole sat in a coffee shop 2 blocks away for most of the morning, then walked past the garage twice at different times enough to see who was there without making it a pattern. On his second pass, he saw a young man, early 20s, lean wearing a gray jacket, standing outside the garage bay, talking on his phone with his shoulders up and his head down, the posture of someone having a conversation they didn't want to be having. Cole kept walking, went around the block, thought about what Margaret had said. He was scared, and being scared is not the same as being willing. He came back 20 minutes later, and the young man was alone, sitting on a low wall beside the garage bay, eating a sandwich and looking at nothing. Cole sat down on the other end of the wall. Not close, just present. The young man glanced at him once and then looked away. They sat in silence for almost 2 minutes. Cole ate nothing, did nothing, made no move toward the young man. He just sat there. "You got something to say?" the young man said finally. His voice was defensive and tired in equal measure. "No," Cole said. "Just taking a break." Another silence. The young man finished his sandwich, balled up the wrapper. He was about to stand when Cole said quietly, "I saw you put her phone back inside the door." The young man went absolutely still. He didn't look at Cole. He stared at the wrapper in his hands. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice had no force behind it. "She told me," Cole said. "The woman from Millard Street. She told me someone put her phone back inside the door after they cut her down. And she said she'd been thinking about that person every day since." He paused. "She wasn't angry about it. I want you to understand that. She wasn't angry." The young man's jaw was tight. He still wasn't looking at Cole. "You need to walk away from me," he said. "Right now. You don't understand what you're doing." "I probably understand it better than you think," Cole said. "My name's Cole Brannigan. I drove down from Cedar Falls because I couldn't read about what happened to her and do nothing. I'm not police. I'm not recording this. I'm just a person who's been paying attention." He let that sit for a moment. "What's your name?" "Nothing." Then barely audible Marcus. "Marcus." Cole said it without emphasis, just acknowledging it. "How long have you been working for Briggs?" Marcus stood up abruptly. "This conversation didn't happen," he said. He was trying for hard and getting somewhere closer to desperate. "Whatever you think you know, whatever you think you're doing, you're going to get people hurt. You're going to get yourself hurt." "Maybe," Cole said. He stayed seated, kept his voice level. "Or maybe what's already happening to people is worse than what I'm risking. Maybe the people who've been paying these men for months because they're too scared not to. Maybe they've already been hurt about as much as a person can be hurt without anyone noticing." Marcus stood there with his back half turned to Cole, and Cole could see it in the set of his shoulders, the fight between the version of himself that would walk away and the version that couldn't. "He'll know I talked to you," Marcus said. His voice was different now, quieter. "Briggs always knows." "Only if you tell him," Cole said. "Or if someone who works with you tells him. Are those men going to cover for you?" A long, painful silence. "No," Marcus said. "Then this is between us," Cole said. "And Marcus, I'm not asking you to testify. I'm not asking you to go on record tomorrow. I'm asking you one question, and you can answer it or not answer it, and walk away either way." He paused. "Does Darnell Briggs report directly to Gerald Marsh?" Marcus turned around. He looked at Cole for the first time fully, and in his face, Cole saw the exhaustion of a young man who had made a series of decisions that had gotten him somewhere he never actually chose to be, and who had been living with that weight for long enough that it showed. "I don't know what you're trying to build," Marcus said slowly. "But I know that whatever it is, if it comes apart, it's the people on those blocks who pay for it. Not you. You can go back to Cedar Falls. They can't go anywhere." "I know that," Cole said. "That's why I'm not leaving until it's finished." Marcus looked at him, looked at the ground, looked back at him. "There's a phone," he said finally, almost inaudibly. "Briggs has a separate phone, a second one, not the one he uses regular. He uses it for one thing only." He stopped. "For Marsh," Cole said. Marcus didn't answer, but he didn't deny it either. "The Friday nights at Hannigan's," Cole said carefully, "after the collection weeks. Is that when he reports?" Marcus's jaw tightened. He looked away. Cole watched him make a decision. "He steps outside at some point during the night," Marcus said. His voice was so low, Cole had to lean forward slightly. "Always around 1 a.m. Steps outside and makes one call. Never more than 5 minutes." He paused. "I don't know what he says, but he always seems easier after, like he's checked in with something." Cole kept his voice perfectly steady, even though his heart was beating faster. "That's enough," he said. "That's what I needed." Marcus looked at him with something raw and complicated on his face. "What are you going to do with it?" "I'm going to be outside Hannigan's on Friday night," Cole said. "And I'm going to document what I can document. And then I'm going to hand everything I've built to people who can use it in ways that stick." He paused. "And when this is over, and it will be over, Marcus, I want you to think about what you do next, because a man who puts a woman's phone back inside her door in the middle of something like that still has choices ahead of him." Marcus stood there for another moment. Something moved through his face that Cole couldn't name exactly, not relief and not guilt and not hope, but some complicated alloy of all three. Then he walked back inside the garage without another word. Cole sat on that wall for another few minutes. The afternoon moved around him ordinary and indifferent. Somewhere across the city, Margaret Hollis was sitting in her kitchen with her splinted wrist and her faith over fear needlepoint, and her 4 months of careful handwriting. Robert Stills was sitting at his table full of organized paper, managing his body, precisely waiting. Donna Okafor was somewhere with a folder and a recorder, and 14 months of work that was finally starting to have a shape. Cole stood up. He took out his phone and sent 2 words to Dana Friday confirmed. Her response came back in 40 seconds. "I'll be there. Across the street. Camera ready." He put his phone in his pocket and started walking back toward the motel. He had 2 days to prepare. 2 days before he would stand in the shadow of a bar on Clement Avenue and watch a man step outside to make a phone call at 1 in the morning, and either everything that had been built would hold or it wouldn't. He thought about Lily's voice on the phone. "Come home soon, Dad." He thought about Margaret's face, that ghost of something, when she described putting the rope into words for the first time, and the steadiness in her voice, that was not absence of fear, but something chosen instead of fear. He thought about what she had said on the first morning sitting on her porch with her coffee. "I knew that someday, if I waited long enough, there would be someone I could give this to." He thought, "Don't let her be wrong about that." He walked faster. He had work to do. Friday came the way the important days always do, quietly without ceremony. The morning looking the same as every other morning, until you remembered what was waiting at the end of it. Cole spent most of the day going through everything one more time. Not because he didn't trust what he'd built, he did the way you trust a structure you've checked 3 times and found solid 3 times. But because the habit of checking was what kept structures from failing. He laid it all out on the motel bed, in the order it would need to be presented. Robert's financial documentation first, because it established the architecture. Margaret's incident log second, because it put names and faces and dates on what the money had bought. His own records of the property acquisition timeline third, showing the direct correlation. And at the center of all of it, the thing that connected the layers, the second phone, and what happened at 1 a.m. on Friday nights outside Hannigan's bar. He called Ray at noon. "Tonight," he said. A pause. "Cole, I know what you're going to say. Do you? You're going to tell me to be careful, that these men are not people who respond well to being cornered, that what I'm doing is not officially sanctioned, and if it goes sideways, there's a limit to how much you can help me." "That's about right," Ray said. "Are you going to listen?" "I'm going to be outside on a public street, Ray. I'm not going inside. Dana Okafor is going to be across the street. I'm not approaching Briggs. I'm documenting."
동네 eşeği, eşiniyet.
"And if Briggs sees you, then I'm a guy on a street corner. You've been in this neighborhood for a week and a half, Cole. People notice people who stick around." "I know." He paused. "If something goes wrong tonight, if it goes wrong in a way that creates an opening, will you be reachable?" A longer pause this time. "My personal phone," Ray said. "Not dispatch. You call my personal phone, and I pick up. And whatever I do after that, I do as a private citizen who happened to be awake on a Friday night." "That's all I need," Cole said. He got to Clement Avenue at 10:15. He walked the block once, slowly getting the shape of it. Hannigan's was mid-block, a working-class bar that had probably been there for 30 years, the kind of place that didn't advertise because it didn't need to. Light through the front window. A few men standing outside smoking. Nothing that looked like anything yet. He found a spot, a small commercial doorway set back enough to give him shadow without making him invisible, and settled in. Across the street, one storefront to the left, he could just barely make out Dana's car. She'd texted him at 10 in position. "Good luck." He didn't text back. He put his phone in his pocket and waited. The thing about waiting that most people got wrong was that they thought it required a kind of suspension, a turning off of thought, a holding of breath. Cole had learned that the opposite was true. Real waiting was active. It meant staying fully present without being restless, watching without fixating, staying loose enough to respond to whatever came and grounded enough not to manufacture it. By 11:30, Briggs's black truck had pulled up and 3 men had gone inside. Cole recognized Briggs from Margaret's description. Big somewhere in his late 30s. A heaviness in the way he moved that was less physical weight than something more deliberate, the practiced weight of a man who wants every room to know he's entered it. 2 of the men with him Cole didn't recognize. Marcus was not among them. By midnight, the street had quieted. Cole's feet were starting to notice the concrete, but he ignored that. At 12:40, his phone buzzed. He looked at it carefully, keeping the screen low. It was a text from a number he didn't recognize. 3 words. "He's getting ready." Cole stared at it. There was only one person that could be from. He typed back, "Marcus." A pause. Then, "Don't text again. Just watch." Cole put the phone away and straightened. At 12:58, the front door of Hannigan's opened and Darnell Briggs came outside alone. He had a drink in one hand and his phone, the second phone, the separate one, already in the other. He moved away from the door, away from the smokers near the entrance, toward the far end of the building, where the street was darker. Cole didn't move. He kept his breathing even. He had a clear line of sight. Briggs made the call. Cole watched him talk. Even at this distance, in this light, he could see the shift in Briggs's posture, the same thing Marcus had described, the checking-in quality of it. The way a man's shoulders come down slightly when he's reporting to someone above him, rather than commanding someone below. It was subtle, and it was real, and it told Cole everything about the power structure that the paper trail could only suggest. The call lasted 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Cole timed it. When it ended, Briggs stood there for a moment looking at the phone. Then he pocketed it, finished his drink, and went back inside. Cole exhaled slowly. His heart was hitting harder than he'd let himself acknowledge while it was happening. He took out his own phone and typed a single word to Dana confirmed. Her response: "Got it on camera from here. Not close enough for audio, but the visual is clear." He stood in the doorway for another 10 minutes, making sure Briggs didn't re-emerge, making sure nothing had shifted. Then he walked calmly to the end of the block, turned the corner, and pulled out his phone and called Ray. Ray answered on the second ring. "Well?" "He called someone at 12:58, Cole said. 4 minutes and 20 seconds. Using a separate phone, the second one. I watched it happen. Dana has it on camera." Silence on Ray's end. "Cole," he said, "that's not enough by itself. Camera footage of a man making a phone call." "I know that," Cole said. "But we have the financial documentation, the property timeline, the incident logs, and now visual confirmation of the communication pattern that connects to Marsh's account. And Ray..." He paused. "I have a witness, someone who was on Briggs's crew during the attack on Margaret, who saw everything." A very long silence. "Cole, you need to tell me what that means." "It means that in the next 48 hours, I need to give that person a reason to believe that talking is less dangerous than staying quiet. And I need you to tell me honestly, if someone came to you with direct eyewitness testimony about what happened to Margaret Hollis' testimony they were willing to give on record, what would you be able to do with it?" He heard Ray breathing. "If someone came to me with that testimony," Ray said carefully, "I would take it to the DA myself, not through the department, directly, because I know which assistant D is in that office are not connected to any of Marsh's political relationships." A pause. "I know one in particular who has been waiting for exactly this kind of case for 2 years." "Then get her ready," Cole said, "because I think we're close." He was back at Margaret's back door at 8 the next morning. She opened it immediately. She had coffee ready, which meant she hadn't slept much either. She poured without asking and set the mug in front of him and sat down and looked at him with that clear, direct gaze. "Tell me," she said. He told her everything. The weight, the timing, the phone call, Dana's footage. And then he told her about Marcus. Something shifted in her face when he said the name, a recognition that was also something more complex. She looked at her coffee cup and was quiet for a moment. "He texted you," she said. "Last night. He gave me the timing. He put himself at risk to make sure I didn't miss it." She nodded slowly. "I want to know something," she said. "When you go back to him, and I think you should go back to him, what are you going to offer him? You said yourself you can't make deals." "No," Cole said. "But I can tell him the truth, which is that when this story publishes, and it will publish with his name not in it, because I will make sure Dana understands that the people who can prosecute Gerald Marsh are going to need every piece of this to hold. And the piece they're going to need most is someone who was present. Someone who can say on record that what happened to you was not random and was not without direction from above." He paused. "I can also tell him that the DA Ray has in mind has a track record of negotiating fairly with cooperative witnesses. That's not a promise, that's a fact." Margaret was quiet. She turned her coffee cup in her hands. "He put my phone inside the door," she said again. She said it the way people say the things they've returned to, most often not like a revelation, but like a compass bearing. The thing they navigate by. "Yes," Cole said. "Then go talk to him," she said. "But Cole," she looked up. "Be honest with him. Don't oversell it. That boy has been sold things before that didn't turn out to be true. He'll know if you're making him promises you can't keep. And if he doesn't trust you, none of the rest of it holds." He found Marcus that afternoon. Not at the garage this time. He hadn't gone back there after their first conversation, didn't want to create a pattern that could be noticed. He'd done enough watching in the past 2 weeks to know where Marcus went on Saturday afternoons, which was a basketball court 4 blocks from the garage, where he shot around alone for an hour in the way people do when they're working something out in their heads. Cole sat on a bench at the edge of the court and waited for Marcus to notice him. It took about 30 seconds. Marcus walked over slowly dribbling and stopped at the edge of the court closest to the bench. He wasn't hostile. He was careful, which was something different and more useful. "You were there last night," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." "Did you get what you needed?" "Enough of it," Cole said. "Marcus, I need to talk to you about what comes next, and I need to do it honestly, so I'm going to tell you some things that aren't comfortable to hear." Marcus held the ball under one arm, waited. "What we have right now is strong," Cole said. "The financial documentation is solid. The property timeline is solid. Dana Okafor has a story that can go to print in a form that Marsh's lawyers can't easily kill. But in a criminal case, and that's what this needs to become, the piece that makes everything unassailable is eyewitness testimony from someone who was present. Not just the paper trail, a person." He paused. "You were there the day Margaret Hollis was attacked. You saw Briggs give the order. And what you told me already tells me you know more about how this operation connects up the chain than anything I've been able to document from the outside." Marcus looked at the basketball in his hands for a moment. When he looked back up, his face was set in a way that was trying to be harder than it actually was. "You know what happens to people who talk," he said. "I know what you're afraid happens," Cole said. "But I also know that Marsh has survived 4 investigations by making witnesses disappear quietly, not by hurting them because hurting them creates attention. His protection has always been silence and legal suppression. That only works when people go quiet on their own." He leaned forward slightly. "If you go on record, Marcus, you are not a quiet thing that can be suppressed. You are the center of a criminal case that Ray Cho is going to walk personally to an assistant DA who has been waiting for this for 2 years. And at that point, Marsh's lawyers are managing a public prosecution, not making a private problem go away." Marcus stood there. The afternoon was warm, and somewhere down the block, kids were arguing about something with the absolute urgency that kids give to things that don't matter. "I'm not a good person," Marcus said. It came out with a rawness that surprised Cole. "I want you to know that I know that. I got into this because I needed money, and Briggs offered it, and I told myself it was nothing serious. And then it got serious, and I told myself I was already in, and I couldn't get out." His jaw tightened. "When they did what they did to that woman, I stood there. I didn't stop it. I put her phone back inside the door afterward because I couldn't. I needed to do something, but I didn't do what actually mattered, and I have to live with that." Cole was quiet for a moment. "You're telling me you want to do what actually matters now," he said. Marcus exhaled. "I'm telling you I'm scared," he said. "And I'm tired of making decisions out of scared." "Then here's the truth," Cole said. "Talking is not safe. It's safer than staying silent in the long run, but it is not without risk. Ray has someone at the DA's office he trusts. That person has a track record of protecting cooperative witnesses and of negotiating honestly. That's real. But I am not a lawyer, and I cannot make you any guarantees." He held Marcus's gaze. "What I can tell you is that a 64-year-old woman was hung from a tree on her own street and refused to stop fighting. A 78-year-old man with heart failure spent 6 months documenting financial crimes from his window because he believed it mattered. And a journalist has been working this story for 14 months on her own time because she knew what was happening and couldn't let it go." He paused. "None of those people are doing this because it's safe. They're doing it because some things are worth doing when they're not safe." Marcus stood very still. The basketball had stopped moving. "If I do this," he said quietly, "if I give testimony, does Margaret Hollis know it's me?" "Yes," Cole said. "What did she say when you told her it might be me?" Cole thought about Margaret at her kitchen table that morning, about the way she'd looked at her coffee cup and said, "He put my phone inside the door," the way she said it every time like it was a thing she was keeping safe. "She said to tell you the truth and not make you promises you couldn't keep," Cole said. "And she said," he paused, "she said that a man who does one right thing in the middle of a lot of wrong ones still has choices ahead of him." Marcus looked away. His face was doing something complicated and private, and Cole gave him the room to do it. The sounds of the neighborhood moved around them, ordinary, indifferent, the city continuing its business the way cities do, regardless of what's happening in the human-shaped spaces inside them. "Okay," Marcus said finally. His voice was quiet and final, the voice of a decision already made and now just spoken aloud. "Okay, tell me what I need to do." Ray met them that evening. Not at the station, at a coffee shop on the far east side of the city, 15 minutes from Westfield Heights, the kind of anonymous place where nobody from either of their regular lives would see them. Marcus sat across from Ray with his hands wrapped around a coffee cup and answered every question Ray asked him with a directness that Cole could see costing him something real. He described the operation, how Briggs structured the collections, which men did, which roles, how the cash was handled after pickup. He described the communication chain, how Briggs reported up the second phone, the standing Friday check-in. And he described the day Margaret Hollis was attacked in specific, precise detail: who was present, who gave the order, what was said. Ray wrote everything down and asked clarifying questions without expression, the professional surface fully intact. But Cole, who had known Ray for 30 years, could see what was moving underneath it. He could see it in the way Ray's jaw tightened slightly when Marcus described the rope, in the way he asked Marcus once mid-conversation to slow down and repeat a specific detail, not because he hadn't heard it, but because he needed to hear it said again. When Marcus finished, Ray closed his notebook and looked at him. "You understand that what you've told me tonight, if you repeat it on record to the assistant DA I'm going to contact, is going to change the rest of your life," Ray said. "Not in a simple way. It'll be complicated and there will be consequences you can't fully predict. I'm not going to tell you otherwise." "I know," Marcus said. "I'm also going to tell you that the DA I have in mind is a woman named Patricia Shen," Ray said. "And I have worked in this city for 19 years, and I have seen cases buried and witnesses disappeared into silence. And I have seen good work fall apart because the right people weren't in the room. Patricia Shen is the right person for this room." He paused. "I am going to call her tonight. Not tomorrow, tonight. And I'm going to ask her to meet with you and with Cole and with the full body of documentation that has been built over the last 2 weeks. And what she does with that is in her hands, not mine." He looked at Marcus steadily. "But I believe she's going to do the right thing with it. That's as much as I can honestly offer." Marcus nodded. He looked at his coffee, then at Cole. "You're going home after this, aren't you?" he said. It wasn't quite a question. Cole looked at him. "Not yet. Not until I know it's in Shen's hands and moving." Marcus almost smiled. It was a tired, complicated smile, but it was real. "Your daughter's going to be pissed at you," he said. Cole almost smiled back. "She's 12. She's already pissed at me about 11 other things. I'm used to it." Ray stood up and put on his jacket. He looked at both of them with the expression of a man who has carried something heavy for a long time and is beginning to believe cautiously that someone else is finally helping hold the weight. "I'll call Shen tonight," he said. "Cole, keep your phone on." He left. Cole and Marcus sat in the coffee shop for a while longer, not talking much. The way people sit together when they've said the important things, and the quiet afterward, is part of it too. Eventually, Marcus pushed back his chair. "I'm going to tell you something," he said. "And I don't need you to respond to it. I just need to say it." He paused. "I've been in that neighborhood my whole life. I grew up on the same streets those people live on. And somewhere along the way, I ended up working for the person destroying it." He stopped. "I don't know how to fix that. But I'm going to start with this. Cole looked at him for a moment. That's enough to start with, he said. Marcus left. Cole sat alone with his coffee and his phone face up on the table waiting for Ray to call back. The evening moved around him. Normal people doing normal Friday evening things, unaware that in a motel room across the city, a folder of documents was about to change the shape of something that had been building for 6 months, and that the woman at the center of it was sitting in her kitchen on Millard Street, probably drinking coffee and watching the street, the way she'd been watching it for 31 years, steady and alert, and refusing in every way a person can refuse to be moved. His phone lit up. Ray's name on the screen. He picked up. "Shen wants to meet Monday morning," Ray said. His voice was careful and controlled, and underneath both of those things was something that sounded for the first time since this started like the early edge of relief. "She wants everything, the full package. And Cole—" A pause. She said, and I'm quoting her, "Tell whoever built this that they built it right." Cole sat with that for a moment. Then he said, "I'll tell Margaret." He told Margaret that night. He came to the back door the way he always did now, and she let him in the way she always did. And this time when he told her what Ray had said, what Patricia Shen had said, she didn't respond immediately. She stood at the kitchen counter with her back to him for a moment, and he saw her shoulders rise and then fall in a breath that was slow and deliberate and private, the kind of breath a person takes when they've been holding something for a very long time, and are only just beginning to believe they might be allowed to put it down. Then she turned around. Her face was composed. Her eyes were bright in a way he hadn't seen before. She sat down across from him and folded her hands on the table and said quietly, "She said they built it right. That's what Ray told me." Margaret looked at her hands. "My husband used to say that the only thing worth building is something that holds," she said. He was talking about the back porch. "But I've always thought it applied to most things." She looked up. "How long before Shen can move on this?" "She needs time to build the criminal case from the documentation. Ray thinks 3 to 4 weeks before any formal action. In the meantime, Dana holds the story she doesn't publish until Shen is ready to move, so neither one triggers the other too early. And Briggs doesn't know." "Not yet." Margaret nodded slowly. She looked at the window. Outside Millard Street was dark and quiet, the way it was every night, the surface of it unchanged, ordinary, giving nothing away. 3 to 4 weeks, she said. "I can do 3 to 4 weeks." "I know you can," Cole said. She looked back at him. "Can you?" He understood what she was asking. Whether he was going to stay. Whether Cedar Falls and Lily and his actual life were going to pull him back before this was finished. "I'll go home Monday after the meeting with Shen," he said. "I need to see my daughter, but I'll be reachable every hour of every day, and if Ray or Dana or you need me back here before this is done, I'll drive the 240 miles, same as I did the first time." He paused. "This doesn't end until it ends, Margaret." She looked at him for a long moment, with that clear, direct gaze that he had come to understand was not just composure, but something harder and more earned than composure. "All right," she said. She stood up and moved to the counter and came back with 2 small glasses and a bottle of bourbon that looked like it had been in the cabinet for a significant number of years. She set 1 glass in front of him and poured without asking. "1 drink," she said, "and then you go rest. Monday is going to be a long day." He raised his glass. She raised hers. Neither of them said anything. They didn't need to. Patricia Shen was 51 years old, small and precise, with the economy of movement of someone who spent their professional life cutting away everything that wasn't essential. She met them in her office on Monday morning, Cole, Ray, and Marcus, who had come in a jacket he'd clearly pressed that morning, carrying himself with the particular stiffness of a man walking into something he's afraid of and doing it anyway. Robert Stills had sent his full documentation by secure email the night before, annotated with the meticulous cross-referencing of a man who had spent 31 years making financial crimes legible to prosecutors. Dana had sent a draft of her article, not for Shen to approve, but to show the shape of the public narrative that would accompany whatever legal action followed. Shen read for 40 minutes while they sat in her office. She didn't speak. She turned pages with the focused silence of someone absorbing and simultaneously calculating, and Cole had the feeling of watching a very precise machine do exactly what it was built to do. When she finished, she set the last page down and looked at Marcus. "You were present at the attack on Margaret Hollis," she said. "Yes," Marcus said. His voice was steady. "Darnell Briggs gave the direct order." "Yes." "And you have knowledge of the communication structure between Briggs and Gerald Marsh?" "Yes." She looked at him for a moment with an expression that gave away very little. "Mr. Marcus Webb," he said. "Mr. Webb, I want to be honest with you about what cooperation in this case means and what it doesn't mean." She folded her hands on the desk. "It means that I will structure the charges against you to reflect your level of cooperation and your role versus Briggs's role. It does not mean immunity from all consequence. It means I will advocate for a disposition that is proportionate and that recognizes the significance of what you're providing. That's a real thing I can offer you. It's not nothing, but I won't dress it up as more than it is." Marcus looked at her for a moment. Then, "That's fair," he said. "I'm not asking for nothing to happen. He stopped. "I just want what I do here to count for something." Shen nodded once. "It will count," she said. She turned to Cole. "The financial documentation from Robert Stills is exceptional. The property acquisition timeline is exactly the kind of structural evidence that makes a RICO case hold rather than collapse in pretrial. Combined with Mr. Webb's testimony and the incident logs," she paused. "What you've built here is not preliminary, it's a case." Ray, sitting beside Cole, exhaled very quietly. "How long do you need?" Cole asked. 3 weeks to formalize the charges and coordinate with the Financial Crimes Unit. I'm going to bring in federal involvement on the money laundering piece that takes the case out of local jurisdiction entirely, which means it's significantly harder for anyone with local political interests to interfere. She looked at Cole directly. "Tell Dana Okafor that I need 3 weeks, 22 days from today. If she can hold the story until then, I'll give her a 15-minute head start on the arrest before we notify any other press." Cole nodded. "I'll tell her." "One more thing." Shen's voice shifted slightly, not softer but more careful. "The woman at the center of this, Margaret Hollis, she's going to be a witness in this prosecution. What she documented in that notebook combined with her willingness to testify about the attack is the human center of this case. The financial crimes are the structure. She's the reason it matters to a jury." She paused. "I want to speak with her directly, soon. Will she be willing?" Cole thought about Margaret at her kitchen table, 4 months of careful handwriting in a worn spiral notebook, waiting for the right person to give it to. "I knew that someday, if I waited long enough, there would be someone." "She's been waiting for this conversation," he said. He went home that evening. He loaded his truck in the motel parking lot in the late afternoon and drove the 8 blocks to Millard Street one last time, parked 2 streets over, and walked to Margaret's back door. She was in the garden when he came around the side of the house the first time he'd seen her outside since he'd arrived, moving slowly between the half-wild rows with a pair of clippers in her good hand, doing something deliberate and careful to a rose bush that had apparently needed attention for a while. She looked up when she heard him. "Patricia Shen wants to meet with you," he said. "This week, if you're willing. Ray will bring her." Margaret looked at the rose bush, clipped one more thing she'd decided on. "I'll make coffee," she said. "She can come Thursday." He almost smiled. I'm going home tonight, he said. She straightened and looked at him fully. He'd been there for nearly 2 weeks, and he still found her gaze difficult to hold comfortably. Not because it was cold, but because it was completely without pretense, and most people are not used to being seen that clearly. Thank you, she said. Just that. 2 words, unembellished, carrying the full weight of everything they both understood they meant. Thank you, Cole said back, for the notebook, for trusting me with it. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said something that surprised him. When you get home, what's the first thing you're going to do? He thought about it honestly. Probably make Lily grilled cheese and let her stay up too late and not argue with her about it. Margaret smiled. It was the first full smile he'd seen from her. Not the ghost of one, not the complicated near thing, but a real one with warmth in it. That sounds about right, she said. Go home, Cole Brannigan. You've done what you came to do. He left her in the garden. He got in his truck and he drove north and 240 miles. Later, he pulled into his own driveway at 11:30 at night and sat in the dark for a moment before going inside. Lily was asleep. His sister had waited up sitting at the kitchen table with a book she wasn't really reading, and when he came in, she looked at him for a long moment with the particular expression of someone who has been worrying about a person they love and is relieved but not ready to say so yet. You look tired, she said. I am. Did it work? Whatever it was. He sat down at the table across from her. I think so, he said. I won't know for certain for another 3 weeks. She studied him. Are you okay? He thought about it honestly, the way the whole experience had taught him to think not the comfortable answer, but the true one. Yeah, he said. I am. I'm going to go check on Lily, and then I'm going to sleep for about 1,000 years. His sister reached across the table and put her hand on his arm for a moment. Then she picked up her book, which meant the conversation was over in the way that mattered, and he got up and walked down the hall. Lily's door was cracked. He pushed it open quietly. She was asleep on her side with one arm out and her hair across her face, and he stood in the doorway for a long time, looking at her the way parents do in those quiet moments, aware of the fact that she was okay, and that being okay was not a given, and that the world contained people who preyed on people who couldn't adequately protect themselves, and that someone had to care about that. He pulled the door nearly shut and went to bed. 22 days. That was what Shen had said. Cole went back to work. He took on a kitchen renovation he'd been putting off, managed 2 job sites, argued productively with a supplier about delivery timelines, and drove Lily to school most mornings. He called Margaret twice a week. She told him about her Thursday meeting with Shen, brief factual. She is very sharp and she doesn't waste time. I liked her immediately. She told him Robert Stills had sent Shen 2 additional memoranda, clarifying specific elements of the financial analysis. She told him that Walter Pennington had started leaving his back door unlocked again, which was something he'd stopped doing months ago, as if something in the air of the neighborhood had already shifted, even before anything official had happened. Dana called him on day 16. I'm going out of my mind sitting on this story, she said. It was neither a complaint nor a request, just a statement of fact from a person being honest about the cost of patience. 6 more days, Cole said. I know. A pause. Cole, for what it's worth, this is the best documented story I've ever had. When this publishes, it's not a blog post in a community paper. I've already been in contact with 2 regional outlets that want to run it simultaneously. This is going to be loud. Good, Cole said. It needs to be loud. On the morning of day 22, his phone lit up with Ray's number at 6:47 a.m. Cole was already awake. He'd been awake since 5. It's happening, Ray said. His voice was controlled in the way it got when things were serious. Shen moved on it last night. Briggs is in custody as of 4 a.m. 2 of his associates picked up simultaneously. Federal arrest warrant for Marsh is being executed this morning. A pause. Cole. Gerald Marsh is being arrested this morning. Cole sat on the edge of his bed and said nothing for a moment. The department is going to put out a statement in about 2 hours, Ray continued. Dana's piece goes live in, Cole heard him check, 43 minutes. Shen kept her word about the head start. Ray, Cole said, is Margaret safe? I sent a car to Millard Street an hour ago. She's fine. She's... A pause, and something in Ray's voice shifted. She's apparently been awake since 3. She made coffee for the officer outside her door. Cole pressed the heel of his hand against his eye for a moment. The exhaustion and relief were almost identical in texture, which he hadn't expected. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, Ray said. You built it. We built it, Cole said. All of us. A silence. Yeah, Ray said. I guess that's right. Another pause. Go read Dana's article when it posts. She did right by everyone. He did. He sat at his kitchen table with coffee and read every word of it. Dana had written it the way she wrote everything clean and precise, and without melodrama, which made it more devastating than melodrama would have been. She started with the oak tree on Millard Street. She ended with the numbers 63 properties, 12 documented incidents, 6 months of financial crimes, 4 months of handwritten evidence logged from a window by a woman who refused to close her curtains. She did not name Marcus Webb. She named him only as a cooperative witness whose testimony had been central to the criminal case. His anonymity was protected. It was the one specific thing Cole had asked her to do, and she had done it without question. He called Margaret at 8 a.m. She answered immediately. I've read it, she said. Her voice was perfectly steady, which no longer surprised him. How are you doing? A pause, not a hesitant one, but the pause of someone choosing words with their usual precision. I'm sitting in my front room, she said, which I haven't done in the morning in 4 months because I didn't like being visible from the street. Another pause. This morning I opened the curtains. Cole closed his eyes for a moment. Margaret. Walter Pennington just walked past my window, she said. He looked up and saw me sitting here and he waved, just waved, like it was a normal morning. Her voice was still steady, but something in the texture of it had changed something below the surface. I waved back. Cole didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I want to tell you something, Margaret said. I've been thinking about it since last night, since I knew it was finally moving. I want to tell you what I was actually thinking about when I opened my front door that day, and they were standing there. He waited. I was thinking about my daughter, she said. She'd called that morning. She called every Saturday. She was telling me about a problem she was having at work, something with a coworker, and I remember thinking while she was talking that she was going to be fine, that she had enough of her father in her to handle whatever came at her. And then I hung up and went to the door. She stopped. I've thought about that conversation a lot since then, about the fact that the last ordinary thought I had before everything changed was about my daughter being strong enough for the world. Another pause. And then I had to decide whether I was. Cole felt something move through his chest that was complicated and quiet, and beyond his ability to name simply. You were, he said. I was, she agreed, but not alone. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not alone. She was quiet for a moment. Thank you, Cole. Thank you, Margaret. He heard her exhale slowly. Then, go see your daughter, she said. She's been patient long enough. The arrests moved fast after that morning. Gerald Marsh was taken into custody at his office at 7:52 a.m., which Dana reported in a follow-up post that went up by noon and was shared 9,000 times by evening. The federal financial crimes charges were filed alongside the state assault and extortion charges, which meant the case was insulated from local interference in exactly the way Robert Stills had argued it needed to be. Shen held a press conference that afternoon. She was precise and unrevealing about the investigation's origin, referring only to an extraordinary body of community documentation combined with cooperation from a key witness. She thanked the Westfield Heights community for their courage. She did not name Cole. She did not name Margaret, who had asked to remain private for now. She named Gerald Marsh and Darnell Briggs in full, and described their operations in language that was measured and devastating and left no interpretive room. Dana's story was picked up by 3 regional outlets by that evening, and 2 national ones by the next morning. Walter Pennington called Margaret twice that day. Lin Nguyen brought food to Margaret's door in the afternoon, a container of soup and a small box of Vietnamese pastries, and stood on the porch for 20 minutes, talking with the ease of 2 neighbors who had been afraid to be neighbors for too long. 2 people who had been paying the monthly protection fee called Ray directly that week to give statements. They had seen the story. They understood that the thing they'd been afraid to do had become possible. Robert Stills sent Cole an email on Wednesday. It was short in his precise and unornamented style the foundation held. Well done. Cole read it twice and then sat with it for a moment, the way you sit with something you want to remember. He went back to Westfield Heights 3 weeks later. Not because anyone needed him. The case was in Shen's hands firmly and irreversibly, but because there was one conversation left to have. He found Marcus on the basketball court, the same way as before. Marcus had given his formal testimony to Shen's office the week before. The process of his own legal situation was beginning complicated and ongoing, but moving in the direction Ray had described. Cole had spoken to Ray about it twice, and Ray had been measured and honest. It wasn't easy, but it was real, and Shen had kept her word about proportionality. Marcus was shooting alone, same as always. He watched Cole sit down on the bench, and he came over without being signaled. "How are you doing?" Cole asked. Marcus shrugged, then seemed to reconsider the shrug as insufficient. "It's a lot," he said. "The legal process is it's a lot, but I'm doing it." A pause. "I got a job. Actual job. Construction crew East Side." Cole looked at him. "Construction?" "Yeah." The corner of Marcus's mouth moved slightly. "I figure I know how to show up and work hard and not ask stupid questions. Seems like a reasonable start." "It is," Cole said. "It's a good start." He paused. "Have you spoken to Margaret?" "No." Marcus bounced the ball once. "I don't know if she'd want that." "She would," Cole said. "She's told me so." He watched Marcus process this. "Not because she needs anything from you, just because she thinks you deserve to hear directly from her that the right thing you did, even the small one, the phone in the doorway, mattered. She's not a person who lets things like that go unacknowledged." Marcus was quiet for a long time. He looked at the basketball. "Okay," he said finally. "Maybe." He looked up. "You going back to Cedar Falls?" "Later today." "For good this time?" "Unless someone needs me," Cole said. "But I think the people who needed me here have what they need now." Marcus nodded slowly. He looked at Cole with something open and unguarded in his face that hadn't been there the first time they'd spoken. Not peace exactly. Not that simple, but the early and fragile thing that comes before peace, when a person has finally stopped running from themselves. "I used to think," Marcus said, "that once you made certain choices that was just who you were, that there wasn't any door out of it." He paused. "I don't think that anymore." Cole looked at him. "That's the most important thing you've said since I've known you," he said. Marcus almost smiled. He went back to the court without another word, and Cole watched him for a moment. This young man on a basketball court on a Saturday afternoon, working something out in his body that his mind was still processing, and then he stood up and walked back to his truck. He stopped at Margaret's house before leaving the city. She was in the garden again. It was a warm afternoon, and the roses she'd been tending. The last time he'd seen her out here were doing something in the direction of blooming. He didn't know enough about roses to say more precisely than that, but they looked less abandoned, more themselves. She straightened when she heard his truck. She pulled off her gardening gloves and came to the fence. "You're leaving," she said. "I am." She looked at him. The rope burns on her neck had faded considerably in the weeks since he'd arrived. Still visible, would probably always be, but no longer raw. She looked like herself, he thought, though he'd only ever known her after what had happened. So what he really meant was that she looked like the person she'd decided to be, regardless of what had happened. "How's Lily?" she said. "She told me last night that she's forgiven me for disappearing for 2 weeks," he said. "She said, and I quote, that since I was apparently doing something important, she would consider the matter closed." Margaret laughed. It was a full, genuine laugh, sudden and warm, and it changed her face entirely. "She sounds like someone I'd like to meet." "I think you two would get along dangerously well," Cole said. Margaret smiled. She looked out at the street for a moment. Millard Street ordinary and present, a woman watering a flower box 2 houses down, a car pulling into a driveway, the oak tree at the end of the block enormous and indifferent and still. Just a tree now. Just a tree. "I'm going to plant something new in the back," Margaret said, looking back at him. "Walter's granddaughter offered to help me this weekend. She's 15, and I don't think she knows the first thing about gardening. But I didn't either at 15, and someone taught me." She paused. "It's time to stop letting things be half wild." Cole looked at her, at the garden, at the street. "Goodbye, Margaret," he said. "Goodbye, Cole Brannigan." She held his gaze. "Drive safe." He got in his truck. He pulled away from Millard Street and drove north through the city, through the neighborhoods that blended into each other, and eventually into Highway, the city falling away behind him, and Cedar Falls pulling him forward the way home always pulls.
Shit.
He drove for a long time without the radio. He thought about the motel room and the folder on the bed, and a night spent going through 12 addresses one by one. He thought about Robert Stills and his organized stacks, and his 31 years of making crimes legible. He thought about Donna Okafor in a diner booth opening a folder with the face of someone who has been waiting for what's inside it. He thought about Marcus Webb on a basketball court working something out that no one could work out for him. He thought about Ray, 19 years in a department with complicated politics, calling him late at night on a personal phone, and saying the things he wasn't officially allowed to say because they were true and they needed saying. He thought about Margaret. 4 months of careful handwriting. One woman at one window watching and recording and refusing in every possible way a person can refuse to be made into someone who closes their curtains. She had not needed Cole Brannigan to be brave. She had been brave before he arrived and would have been brave without him. What she had needed was someone to see what she'd built and understand its value and carry it to the right people at the right time. What she had needed was for someone somewhere to pick up the phone. He thought about Lily saying the night before he'd left for Westfield Heights the first time, "Is it dangerous?" And him saying, "Not yet." He thought about what the right answer actually was. Not the careful answer, not the reassuring one, the true one.
Money.
The true answer was, it might be. It might cost something. The things that matter usually do. But you pick up the phone anyway. You drive the 240 miles anyway. You sit in the parking lot at midnight and you go door to door on the block where the doors don't open, and you sit across from people whose fear is completely justified, and you tell them you're not leaving until it's finished, not because you're fearless, but because fear and doing the right thing are not opposites. They never were. He pulled into Cedar Falls as the sun was getting low. He parked in his driveway and sat in the truck for just a moment, the engine ticking quiet in the evening air. Then he went inside, and Lily looked up from the couch and said, "Finally," in the way that 12-year-olds say things that mean something far larger than the word itself, and he crossed the room and pulled her into a hug that she pretended to object to for approximately 2 seconds before hugging him back. That night he called Margaret to tell her he'd made it home safely. She answered on the second ring. "Good," she said. "Now stay there." He smiled. "Yes, ma'am." He heard her put the kettle on, the small domestic sound of it clear across 240 miles. "The neighborhood was quiet today," she said. "Completely quiet. The good kind." A pause. I sat on my front porch this morning. First time in 5 months. Drank my coffee out there and watched the street wake up. He could picture it exactly. The wooden chair, the coffee mug, the oak tree at the end of the block. Margaret Hollis on her own front porch, on her own street, visible, unguarded, unafraid. Good? He said. Yes, she said. It was. They said goodbye, and he sat in his kitchen, in the quiet of his own house, and he thought about the thing that connects all of this. The thing that is the point, the real point beneath everything else. It is not that one man from Cedar Falls drove 240 miles and changed something. It is that one woman refused to close her curtains and documented what she saw, and waited for someone to show up, and believed against every reason not to believe that someone would. And someone did. That is what changes things. Not the absence of fear, not the presence of exceptional courage, but the simple and radical and endlessly difficult choice to stay visible when everything in you wants to hide. To keep the notebook. To open the door. To put the phone back inside. Evil does not require cooperation. It only requires silence. And silence is broken one voice at a time, by one person who decides in whatever room they're in whatever version of Millard Street they're standing on, that what they've witnessed is not something they can walk away from. That is the only extraordinary thing about Cole Brannigan. Not that he was fearless, not that he was exceptional, but that when the phone rang, he answered it. And when he answered it, he didn't look for a reason to go back to his ordinary life. He looked for a way forward. And that one choice made once by a person with nothing to recommend them, except the refusal to look away, is always without exception where the story actually begins.